Hi there, it's the 5th Sunday after Epiphany, and I thought I'd share a short video reflection on some of the readings that have been suggested for churches to look at today. The readings are from the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 1 to 13, then the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 1 to 11, and the gospel reading is from Luke 5, 1 to 11. So feel free to pause the video and have a look at those and then start the video up again. In today's readings, we heard 3 stories of calling, and I wonder whether you remember an experience of feeling that you were called to follow Christ. Did you feel that you were up for the job, or did you have some doubts? In the reading from Isaiah, we heard an account from the prophet about a vision of God sitting on a throne and just the hem of God's robe filling up the temple, the greatest and grandest of buildings. Isaiah's response to this fantastic vision is concern that he's not worthy of the revelation of God's glory. He says, "Woe is me, I'm lost, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Isaiah is ashamed because of his limitations as a human being, but a seraph, one of the beings attending God, purifies Isaiah's lips with a burning coal. It sounds very painful. Isaiah's limitation is not something he can overcome himself. He needs divine intervention. Then, when God asks who can be sent as a messenger, Isaiah, with his tender, newly purified lips, volunteers. But the message seems kind of strange. Go and say to these people, keep listening but do not comprehend, keep looking but do not understand. Make the mind of this people dull and stop the ears and shut their eyes, so that they cannot look with their eyes and listen with their ears and comprehend with their minds and turn and be healed. It seems like God is saying, say things that'll ensure they don't listen to you. What's the point of sending a messenger who will be ignored? God was sending Isaiah with unpopular news, warning the land of Judah that they would be devastated by the invading forces of Assyria, and most of the survivors would be removed from their homeland. And many of us have felt called to bring messages that are not popular. Many people in our global society have heard the call to lower our carbon emissions in order to stop climate change, so that we can save this home that we share with all people, so that we can care for this planet that we share with all creatures. That message may be unpopular with some people. It may be unpopular with some of our neighbours. But it's God who's called us to care for creation. The unpopularity is something that might discourage us, but we can also see that there are others in the wider community who are also concerned about this. From a Christian perspective, we might say that God's not just active within the church, but is calling all kinds of people to care for the earth. Isaiah's message is a frightening message, but includes a word of hope. The imagery of a stump remaining, even though the terebinth, the sacred tree, has been destroyed, and it's a stump from which new life will grow. In the reading from Paul's letter to the ancient church at Corinth, he talks about his own experience of being called to follow Christ and to share the good news of the resurrection. And he talks about many other followers of Christ first. He talks about the resurrected Christ appearing to Peter, who he calls Cephas, and then to the 12 male disciples who Jesus had given special attention to while he was alive. And he talks about Christ appearing to a whole crowd of women and men, and to his brother James, a leader of the Jerusalem church. Paul says that he's the last to have encountered the resurrected Christ, and says it's as though he was born too late, as though he was stillborn. He says that he's unworthy to be called an apostle because he encountered the risen Christ later than the others, and in the meantime he spent his life mistreating Christ's followers. And for this reason, he questions his calling to share the good news of the resurrection. He says that because of this history, anything that good that comes out of his work is actually due to God's effort, not his own ability. In the gospel reading, we hear an account of Peter being called. Peter is a fisher and has been fishing from his boat all night, catching nothing. And being a fisher, presumably, Peter knows what's the best time and place to fish. But now, during the day, Jesus calls Peter to take the boat back out and let down the nets. When following Jesus' directions leads to an almost disastrously successful catch, Peter's overcome by a sense of being unworthy because of his human limitations, just like Isaiah and Paul. But still, Jesus reassures him. In all of these stories, human beings encounter the divine and become acutely aware of their human frailty. But they're also assured of their worthiness because they've been chosen to be involved in what God's doing in the world. The one doing the work is God, and we're invited to respond and participate. It's not up to us to fix everything by our own efforts. It's not up to us to save the church by our own scheming. It's not up to us to save the world with our own complicated plans. But we should be alert to where God is at work so that we can respond to the call to join God in that divine work. Let's take some time to consider where God may be at work today and where God's Spirit is inviting us to participate.